Royal hunting, also the royal art of hunting, was a hunting practice of the aristocracy throughout the known world in the Middle Ages, from Europe to the Far East. While humans hunted wild animals since time immemorial, and all classes engaged in hunting as an important source of food and at times the principal source of nutrition, the necessity of hunting was transformed into a stylized pastime of the aristocracy. More than a pastime, interaction, essential training for war, and a privilege and measurement of nobility. In Europe in the High Middle Ages, the practice was widespread. Hieratic formalized recreational hunting has taken place since Assyrian kings hunted lions from chariots in a demonstration of their royal nature. In Roman law, property included the right to hunt, a concept which continued under the Frankish Merovingian and Carolingian monarchs who considered the entire kingdom to be their property, but who also controlled enormous royal domains as hunting reserves. The biography of the Merovingian noble Saint Hubert recounts how hunting could become an obsession. Carolingian Charlemagne loved to hunt and did so up until his death at age 72. With the breakup of the Carolingian Empire, local lords strove to maintain and monopolize the reserves and the taking of big game in forest reserves, and small game in warrens. They were most successful in England after the Norman conquest, and in Gascony from the 12th century. These were large sanctuaries of woodland, the royal forest, where populations of game animals were kept and watched over by gamekeepers. Here the peasantry could not hunt, poaching being subject to severe punishment. The injustice of such, in part, preserves was a common cause of complaint in populist vernacular literature. The lower classes mostly had to content themselves with snaring birds and smaller game outside of forest reserves and warrens. By the 16th century, areas of land reserved for breeding and hunting of game were of three kinds, according to their degree of enclosure and being subject to forest laws: forests, large unenclosed areas of wilderness, chases, which normally belonged to nobles, rather than the crown, and parks, which were enclosed, and not subject to forest laws. English and French accounts agree on the general makeup of a hunt. They were well planned so that everyone knew his role before going out. The hunt par force required each participant to have a specific role. If someone slipped in his role, not only could he easily get lost, but it put the rest of the group in danger by exposure. Many nobles hunted par force, for a multitude of reasons, but above all because it was considered the purest and noblest form of hunting. The ritual of the hunt was meant to heighten danger within a controlled context. Gaston, Duke of Orleans, argued against hunters taking game in more efficient ways such as by bow and arrow or by setting traps, saying, "I speak of this against my will, for I should only teach how to take beasts nobly and gently." Hunters like Gaston hunted not to kill the largest game, but rather for the process of the hunt, preferring ritual over efficiency. This mode of hunting was also important in the upbringing of noble youths. Boys at the age of 7 or 8 years began to learn how to handle a horse, travel with a company in forests, and utilize a weapon, practicing these skills in hunting groups. As a result, young men in the nobility and royalty were able to transfer acquired skills such as horsemanship, weapons management, woodcrafting, terrain assessment, and strategy formation from the hunting grounds to the battlefield in wars. Hunting also cultivated their education, and taught them the importance of ritual and noble acts. The weapons used for hunting would mostly be the same as those used for war: bow, crossbow, lance or spear, knife, and sword. Bows were the most commonly used weapon. Although the crossbow was introduced around the time of the First Crusade, it was not generally used for hunting until the second half of the 15th century. Cudgels were used for clubbing small games, in particular by women who joined the hunt. Boar spears were also used. With the introduction of handheld firearms to hunting in the 16th century, traditional medieval hunting was transformed. The hunter would also need a horn for communication with the other hunters. In addition to this, the hunter depended on the assistance of certain domesticated animals. Three animals in particular were essential tools for the medieval hunter: the horse, the hound, and the hawk or falcon. The horse was the most important animal of the great medieval household. The stables, also called the marshalsea, would be separate from the rest of the household, and its head officer, the marshal, would be one of the household's senior officers. The marshal would have pages and grooms serving under him to care for the horses. A large household would have a wide array of horses for different purposes. There were carts and pack horses employed in the day-to-day work of the household, palfreys used for human transport, and destriers, or war horses, a powerful and expensive animal that in late medieval England could obtain prices of up to £80. Although it had the necessary qualities, the destrier would not be used for hunting, due to its value. Instead, a special breed called a courser would be used. The courser, though inferior to the destrier and much smaller than today's horses, still had to be powerful enough to carry the rider at high speeds over large distances, agile, so it could maneuver difficult terrain without difficulty, and fearless enough not to be scared when encountering wild beasts. The dog was essential for several purposes. Its good sense of smell made it invaluable in finding the quarry. It would then assist in driving the hunted animal, and, when the animal was finally at bay, the dog would either be the instrument of attack or distract the quarry while the hunter moved in for the kill. Different breeds would be used for different tasks and different sorts of game, and while some of these breeds are recognizable to us today, the dogs were nevertheless somewhat different from modern breeds. Foremost among the hunting breeds was the greyhound. This breed was valued first and foremost for its speed, but also for its ability to attack and take down the game. Since the greyhound did not have much stamina, it needed not to be released before the quarry was in sight, toward the end of the hunt. Furthermore, greyhounds, though aggressive hunters, were valued for their docile temper at home, and often allowed inside as pets. The eland, or allant, was a somewhat more robust animal than the greyhound and therefore used against larger game, such as bears or boars. The eland was considered a reckless animal and had been known to attack domestic animals or even its owner. The mastiff was an even more rugged breed, and though also used on the larger game, was mostly considered useful as a guard dog. What all these dogs lacked was the ability to follow the scent of the quarry and run it down. For this purpose, the running hound was used. The running hound was somewhat similar to today's foxhound. This dog had, as the name indicates, excellent stamina, as well as a good nose. Another dog valued for its scenting skills was the limer, a forerunner of today's bloodhound. Handled on a long leash, the limer would be used to find the lay of the game before the hunt even started, and it was therefore important that, in addition to having a good nose, it remained quiet. Silence in the polymer was achieved through a combination of breeding and training. Other dogs used for hunting were the kennet, the terrier, the harrier, and the spaniel. The hounds were kept in a kennel, inside or separate from the main domicile. Here the dogs would have oak beds to sleep on, and often also a second level where the dogs could go when the ground level became too hot or too cold. Outside the kennel, there would be grass for the dogs to eat whenever they had digestive problems. To care for the dogs would be a hierarchy of servants such as pages, varlets, aides, and veneurs, the page being the lowest, often a young boy. Pages would often sleep in the kennels with the dogs, to keep them from fighting and care for them if they got sick. Though this might seem harsh by modern standards, the warm dog house could often be much more comfortable than the sleeping quarters of other medieval servants. Medieval terminology spoke of hawks of the tower and hawks of the fist, which roughly correspond to falcons and hawks, respectively. The female hawk was preferred since it was both larger than the male and easier to train. A male saker falcon is approximately 2/3 of the weight of a female. Falconers call male peregrines tiercels, derived from the Latin word for third. Hawks were captured all over Europe, but birds from Norway or Iceland were considered of particularly good quality. Falconry, a common activity in the Middle Ages, was the training of falcons and hawks for personal usage, which included hunting games. Falcons and hawks have different physical makeups which affects their mode of hunting. Ducks, herons, and cranes were the common game hunted by falcons and hawks. The main differences between the two species of birds lie in their wings and tails. Falcons have long, narrow wings with a long tapered tail. As a result, they fly at incredibly high levels. To kill the game, they elevate high up in the sky and then dive at their target. Their dives can go up to 200 miles per hour. They utilize their talons on the downward dive to slash the game. Usually, their strikes kill the game with the first slash. Hawks, however, have shorter, rounder wings and longer tails. They glide along at lower altitudes. To kill their game, they glide toward their target and then use a burst of speed to close in. They utilize their talons to dig in and clutch onto their game until it is dead. As a result of their makeups, falcons and hawks were utilized by owners for different terrains. Falcons were used in open fields while hawks were used in marshlands and woodland. Training a hawk was a painstaking process. It was normal at first to seal the bird's eyelids, sew them shut, so that it would not be scared or distracted. The trainer would then carry the hawk on his arm for several days, to get it accustomed to human presence. The eyes would gradually be unsealed, and the training would begin. The bird would be encouraged to fly from its perch to the falconer's hand over a gradually longer distance. Hunting games would be encouraged first by the use of meat, then a lure, and eventually live prey. Such prey included herons, sometimes with their legs broken to facilitate the kill. Hawks would be housed in mews, a special edifice found in most large medieval households, mostly a certain distance from the main domicile so that the hawks would not be disturbed. The mews could be rather elaborate structures. There would be windows in the wall, and the ground would be kept clean so that the bird's regurgitations could be found and analyzed. Of all the falcons, the gerfalcon was considered the best one. They were thought of as the highest quality when white ones were imported from Greenland. King Frederick II considered them the best, out of respect to their size, strength, audacity, and swiftness. Of the hawks, the goshawk was the most highly valued. They were more expensive and brought in more money for training. Goshawks from Scandinavia in particular were highly sought after. The royal forest was an area of land designated to the king for hunting and forestry. It included woodland, heathland, and agricultural land. As of the 12th century, nearly a third of England's territory was assigned as royal forest. Only the king and other permitted members of the nobility were allowed to hunt game in the assigned area. To maintain this restriction, forest law was introduced to enforce the boundaries. Special officials known as foresters were in charge of overseeing forest law. The foresters were among the most hated of royal officials as they were often corrupt, having a reputation for making illegal side profits on royal forest property by farming, extracting natural resources, and poaching game. They exacted many punishments for poaching game, farming, and other illegal activities in the royal forest. Heavy fines and imprisonment were the common discipline. While foresters were in charge of the upkeep of forest law, sometimes the king would employ the local sheriff to get involved. Hunting, however, was not the only function of the royal forest. Kings would also use these territories for cattle upbringing, farming, and extracting the land's resources. They also notably served as reserves for all kinds of wildlife. King Henry I of England was known for having a fascination with pet animals. His parks included wild animals like lions and leopards. Forest laws regarding hunting created class distinctions. King Richard II of England issued the first game law in 1390. It constituted a property requirement of a certain value to have hunting dogs or other hunting equipment. Poaching was a common offense in the Middle Ages. It was an act that was engaged by all of society and was widely tolerated by it. All kinds of poachers engaged in this illegal act, but sometimes it was a highly organized activity. Poachers worked together in rings to accomplish their goals. They would poach the game off royal forest property and sell it to commoners for a profit. Sometimes, these rings worked for other lords and even monks to supply them. The lords and monks, in turn, would either own consumption or sell it in the common marketplace for a profit. The game would not be the only item poached from royal forests. Many sought after its resources, with wood in particular a highly sought commodity. Often the arresting of poachers did not end cleanly. Poachers would resist arrest, sometimes resorting to assaulting and shooting foresters to escape. There is a recorded instance of St. Thomas Becket performing a miracle by healing a forester shot in the throat by poachers. Sometimes the nobility would engage in poaching by either taking more game than permitted or by hunting in a restricted area. Like everything else in the Middle Ages, hunting was full of symbolism. Religious symbolism was common. The hart or the unicorn was often associated with Christ, but the hunt itself could equally be seen as the Christian's quest for truth and salvation. In the more secular literature, romances for instance, the hunter pursuing his quarry was often used as a symbol of the knight's struggle for his lady's favor. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more videos.